Hi, I'm Dr. Linda Mintle. Hey, thanks for listening to the Dr. Linda Mintle Show. Faith radio podcasts are only possible because of your support. Thanks for giving and for sharing with a friend.
Doing life together, reaching out with hope, encouraging one another, each step along the road. You and I can make everything a little better, doing life together.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Linda Mintle Show. I'm your host, Dr. Linda Mintle, the relationship doctor, and I'm here along with my co-host, the other Dr. Mintle. Yay, my husband, Norm.
Dun, 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 dun.
And every weekend we're here, we're doing life together. And as always, we're so glad that everybody's joining us.
That's for sure. Even if you're joining us on a podcast on a walk on Tuesday.
Yeah.
That
That's when
works
I
too.
listen. I actually listen when I'm walking.
Right.
That's a really good way to get in your steps.
All right, here's a question. Have you ever met someone who thinks you are what your mom used to call the cat's meow? You know,
That's a very old phrase, isn't it?
I know,
Yeah.
it really is.
Yeah.
They think you're great. And
Yeah.
then in the next minute, it seems like they hate your guts. I mean, really, it seems like they see things in black and white and there's no gray. Well, you may be dealing with someone with what I think you would call borderline personality disorder, and that's what we're going to talk about today. How does it develop, and how do we live with someone who has this?
Yeah, it's a very frustrating thing because of that flip. Can be all or nothing when they talk to you. And one of the reasons that we're talking about borderline personality disorder is because it does cause some relationship problems.
I would
and
think.
We're a relationship show. And so, again, the person can be very volatile in their emotions, and they can create what's called a lot of drama in families.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
So you have a list of questions that could help us as we think about how do we deal with someone or if someone has borderline personality disorder.
Few things that you can think about are, do you feel like you must tiptoe around the person? Have you ever had that feeling
That
like
caution.
on eggshells?
Yeah.
We say walking
Yeah.
on eggshells. Does the person shift from emotional extremes so that really great one moment and then really upset the next moment? Does the person, like you mentioned, sort of see you as all bad or all good? So like there's no gray in between. Do you feel like you can't win? Do you feel like everything is always your fault? And do you feel manipulated by guilt, fear, or just outrageous behavior?
Goodness, that would be difficult to live with, especially someone who behaves like this routinely or all the time. I mean, if you answered yes to any of those questions, you could be dealing with someone who has borderline personality disorder. So please give us a definition of what that is.
So it's considered a psychiatric disorder that is characterized by enduring patterns of behavior based on inner feelings that deviate from the normal expectations of a person's culture. So that's a lot. That's a mouthful, right? But the real key of this is enduring patterns. So this enduring pattern of quickly getting upset and yelling at people and then suddenly saying, you're not upset. It's a patterned behavior. And that means that whatever is happening, that person is developing these certain behavioral patterns that cause distress to him or herself, so much so that it can get in the way of developing healthy relationships and can cause a lot of problems at work, at home, at school, wherever they are, church,
Yeah,
anywhere.
makes sense.
So think of it like having a unique way of thinking, feeling, and behaving. It's not a character judgment. Rather, it's a clinical term that means your pattern of relating to the world is significantly different from the norm. In other words, you don't act in ways that most people expect. So most people don't expect me, Norm, if I say something to you, for you to suddenly get all upset and then flip on me real fast and then try to, be a different person.
Right.
They don't expect that because that's not what people normally do. So this causes a lot of problems in your life if you're the person who's suffering with borderline personality disorder, but it also causes problems with all of the different people in your life and all these different places that you engage in.
So is the diagnosis for this made in children usually or adults? When does it show up?
Yeah, so it's not a diagnosis you make in childhood because it's you have to have these persistent behavior patterns that take time to develop. So what's happening is the child is reacting to things in their environment. Lots of time there's lots of trauma and things that are very difficult, chaotic environments. And so it takes time to develop. So the diagnosis isn't made till usually later adolescence or early adulthood. Once a person is more set in the way that they interact with other people, then it's easier to make that diagnosis. So the main problem is that it causes a lot of instability in relationships.
So what's going on inside this person who has the disorder? That must be distressful and emotional for them.
Yeah, and the key thing here for someone with borderline personality disorder is that they have these frantic efforts to avoid abandonment.
Oh, wow.
That's really the root cause of this, is avoiding abandonment. It's a fear. I will be abandoned. So to avoid that possibility, the person often cuts off relationships abruptly or takes control by leaving or by testing people in life to see, if I test this person, are they going to stick around? But the person then gets really upset at small things, like someone coming home from work late. And this is rooted in the fear that they will be left alone or, again, abandoned. And the fear leads the person to do this back and forth. You're no good. You are good. Any little thing can lead to the person thinking you are the good guy one moment and the bad guy the next, because they desperately want to keep you close so they can beg you to stay, track every movement, block you from leaving. But this does actually the opposite, right? It drives people away. And then guess what the person feels?
Right.
Abandoned.
Right. So where does this all come from? I mean, what leads someone to worry that much about being abandoned?
Yeah, we think there's a little bit of a biological component, but mostly it comes from the environment and childhood experiences. So the person doesn't know themselves very well, and they have an unstable sense of self, and that usually has a lot to do with, they're not validated as a child, they're not asked about their emotions, they're not shown how to manage their emotions. One minute they feel okay about themselves, the next minute they don't. So they have this unclear sense of self that often develops from a very chaotic childhood, maybe even being abandoned physically or emotionally, or a lot of times from trauma. And so they live their life feeling like an exposed nerve, highly sensitive to anything and everything. Anything can trigger an intense reaction.
So it's just always raw.
Yeah, it's raw.
Yeah. I've heard you talk about differences in brains and brain styles and many different disorders that we've discussed over the years. Are there brain differences in BPD?
Borderline personality disorder, yeah. So the brain is quite complex, and it acts like it's on high alert most of the time when someone has this. The fight or flight, we know we've talked about that, fight or flight, that sort of switch is always turned down. And the rational part of your brain is being hijacked. But you can change your brain. And that's the good news that we'll talk about later.
Good. I've often heard it said that living with someone with this disorder is like living on a roller coaster. You're up and down emotionally all the time.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it, because the person becomes so highly emotional and then has trouble calming down. They're very, very reactive, and they have these chronic feelings of emptiness. So just imagine what that would feel like. You're constantly feeling empty. And because of that, they look to others then to fill them up.
Sure.
But they're always disappointed. Others are going to let them down. Not everybody's going to be able to meet every single need the way you need it, maybe making up for a lot of the needs that you didn't get met when you were younger, except for God, right? God is somebody who never leaves. He doesn't abandon you. And this is one of the reasons why spiritual help in this is so important, because if you don't have this sort of what we would call a constant object that is there, that will not leave you, that will be stable, predictable, consistent in your life, if you read the Bible and you get a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, you can really feel that in your life.
That's great. So all this up and down emotional stuff, the fears of abandonment, are they also impulsive because of those?
Yeah, impulsivity is another characteristic, and it can be potentially very self-damaging because there's a lot of acting out. So the person might engage in risky sex, spending more than a person can afford, a lot of times using drugs and alcohol. They're just so upset, they just grab for something. Reckless driving, binge eating. These risky behaviors then make a person feel good at the moment, but they know how bad it is later on because they're aware of the consequences.
Oh, sure.
And then they're often hurting the people around them when they do those things.
Should we also be concerned about thoughts of suicide because of all this impulsivity?
Yeah, that is often the case, and that is a concern because the person feels, think about it, impulsive, we've said, empty, abandoned. They can make suicidal statements and gestures, and sometimes they engage in self-injury where they might cut themselves or burn themselves. On the flip side, they can become very angry and lash out with temper tantrums. And these emotional reactions are extreme, and they make, as we've been talking about, make it so difficult. And the person can get into a tailspin then when things go wrong. It just becomes very heightened in drama and emotionally reactive. And then, they feel bad. And as a result of that, they can really be driven to at least think about suicide, talk about it, and potentially even make an attempt.
How can the person calm down from all of that?
Yeah, it's difficult because most of us learn how to calm ourselves and soothe ourselves from negative feelings when we're a child in the teen years. So we get a lot of help with that from the people around us. But someone with borderline has a really hard time doing that. And that's part of the treatment. You can be taught to learn how to calm down and be less reactive. So that's the good news if you get help. Because when you're highly emotional and you're fearful, your brain is not able to think well.
Right.
You just don't think. You just react, and act. So calming down helps you choose better ways to respond. Otherwise, you're going to say hurtful things, you're going to act in dangerous or inappropriate ways. Then that makes you feel guilty or ashamed. So you have this painful cycle that can feel impossible to escape. But it's not. It just takes a lot of work and practice.
So what should they do if they're feeling so overwhelmed?
Well, rather than doing anything in the heat of the moment, you have to learn to control that impulsivity. And the biggest thing is you have to learn how to tolerate distress. So that's the key to changing that destructive pattern. The ability to just tolerate distress is going to help you press pause when you have the urge to act out. And instead of reacting to things, you learn to tolerate them, ride them out a little bit. And this is where the therapy is really helpful. They can train you and teach you how to do that.
This is also good and informative. We're going to tell you more right after this break. It's an important conversation. So share this podcast with someone or call someone now if you're listening on the radio. We'll be right back with the Dr. Linda Mintle Show.
Hi, I'm Dr. Linda Mintle of the Dr. Linda Mintle Show.
And I'm Dr. James Cribbs, and we co-authored a book, Living Beyond Pain.
If you're one of the 100 million people suffering from chronic pain, this is a book for you, Living Beyond Pain, in stores now. Everyone worries, don't they? Well, just listen to the nightly news or read the economic forecast or even talk to your family. Hi, I'm Dr. Linda Mintle. Opportunities to worry present themselves many times during our day. So why would God tell us not to worry when it almost seems like it's impossible? First, He knows the physical damage worry does to our bodies. Second, He wants to calm us down by taking the burden of control away from us. Hey, we don't have control. No matter how much we think we do, He does. And third, He wants us to trust Him. The root of worry is doubting God. Doubt is not trusting that God is who He says He is, or He will do what He says He will do. So every day, take your worries to God. Rehearse His goodness, accept His grace, and walk in the confidence that He is in control and He's working all things for your good.
Welcome back to the Dr. Linda Mintle Show. Just a quick reminder that you can follow Dr. Linda on her social media, X and Instagram, at Dr. Linda Mintle, Dr. Linda Mintle, and on Facebook, Dr. Linda Mintle, author and speaker. You can go to visit her website, drlindamintle.com, and everything there is important to you because you can find her books and her blogs, and you can listen to our podcasts on myfaithradio.com. You can go to your favorite podcast platform. Just search Dr. Linda Mintle. That's the key to all of it.
Yeah.
You want to find her?
It's easy.
Find
my
her name. There
yeah,
it is.
It's
Okay.
my name. Right.
All right. Just before the break, we were talking about how difficult it is sometimes to get calm.
Yeah. So one of the techniques that's pretty simple to do but can really help you calm down is distraction. So when you feel real emotionally upset, if you can distract your brain, like you can look at something in the room and start describing it, or you can count backwards from 10, or start to count in Spanish or some other language, or you can think of 5 cities that begin with the letter C. That kind of exercise brings your brain out of the emotional state and into a thinking state. And when we think, we can act better because we're considering what we're doing, right? So I would say, even if you're really struggling with this and you can't do any of those things, you could go to the garden and calm yourself down. I mean, go start digging in the dirt if you like to garden.
Good point.
That's a way to sort of tolerate the distress of something that's really bothering you. Some people use painting, Norm. Sometimes people use an instrument. They'll go play the piano. They'll pull out their guitar. You can do a puzzle. You can read a book. You can play a computer game. You can do that. What is that, Sudoku? I don't do it.
Right.
You do. You've done those
I've
before.
done it, but
You gave up on it. Yeah,
up.
But you do word puzzles on your
do word
phone all the
puzzles.
time.
Yep.
Just distract the brain and take yourself out of the emotional state, and that will help you start to learn how to calm down.
That's good. One of the things you've mentioned before is that this disorder makes having healthy relationships challenging. People would naturally be annoyed with you, it seems, and quite easily. Why is this?
I think it's because you have trouble stepping back and seeing things from another person's perspective. When somebody has borderline personality disorder, they're so fearful and worried about abandonment that they're always looking to blame the other person or to get the person to act a certain way to make them feel better. So it's easy for them to misread the thoughts and feelings of other people, and they can easily misunderstand how others see you. It's often hard for the person to see how his or her behavior is affecting other people. Mm-hmm. It's like the person has a blind spot on relationships. And so what happens is there's a lot of blame.
Wow. So is this part of the problem, that the person thinks he or she can read minds and is convinced that the other people are motivated, they're out to hurt them or out to abandon them?
Yeah, that's an old psychiatric term called projection, right? Mm-hmm. They're worried about that the very thing they fear is going to happen, so they try very hard to control it. And they know. So they're like, oh, I know what that person's thinking. I know what they're going to do. And it's always, based on very negative kinds of thoughts. So the person just misreads the cues. If, for example, let's say somebody just abruptly ended a phone conversation, they might think, oh, that person doesn't like me, and that person's not really my friend. And it might be that they had an emergency and something happened and they had to hang up quickly.
Or their cell phone died.
Yeah, or something like that. Yeah. So the work is to really help the person consider that there might be other reasons why you didn't get your need met or why someone didn't act the way you wanted them to act. Like that person suddenly got called in a meeting or had to use the restroom or any other, number of reasons that could have happened. Maybe the person just needed their coffee that morning.
I can relate to that one.
I know, that's why I threw that in there.
So does medication help with this disorder?
No, it really, it doesn't help with the actual personality disorder part of it. Now, what you'll hear is that people will take medication even though they might have this diagnosis, but that's because they're taking it for other things that are going on in their life. So there is no approved medication, very little research on medication helping with a personality disorder of any kind, whether that's narcissistic personality or any of these other personality disorders. There's the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has not approved any medications for the treatment of borderline personality disorder because you really have to work on these patterns of behaviors that you've developed over time. So this is different than a lot of other mental health disorders like bipolar, where you clearly need to take the medication to help your brain in that one. So medication can make a real difference for if you're also majorly depressed or you have other issues that might be helped by medication. But the real work here is to really work on regulating your emotions, tolerating distress, and becoming more interpersonally effective.
So tell us more about how that therapeutic approach works to help people.
It really is a very specialized approach to treatment. Healing is a matter of breaking those dysfunctional patterns of thinking, of feeling, and behaving that are causing all this distress.
Whoa, breaking patterns, that's not easy.
No,
especially
it's not.
Lifelong habits. This must take a lot of work.
It does. But if you do the work, you can really have a much better life and you can do better in relationships.
That's good news.
But you have to learn to pause, reflect, and then act in new ways. And that's going to feel unnatural and uncomfortable at first. But with time, the person can develop new habits, new emotional patterns that can help them maintain their control and have a better balanced emotional life. So, every time you practice a new coping response or some type of calming technique, you're creating new neural pathways in the brain. And so you want to keep using that. You want to keep practicing that because you're going to make that pattern consolidate, and that makes a habit over time. Some treatments, such as Christian meditation, can even grow your brain matter. Did you know that?
No.
It actually helps the brain grow. Growing your brain matter is a good thing. And the more you practice, the stronger and more automatic all of this becomes. So don't give up. If you're frustrated and you're listening to this, or you know somebody that has this diagnosis, with time, with dedication, you can change the way you think, feel, and act. And remember, nothing's impossible with God, right? With the help of the Holy Spirit in us, you can make these changes, but you have to do the work. You have to change those enduring patterns in your brain and change them to something more positive.
And I would imagine you have to be motivated. And from a Christian
yes.
perspective, I want to be more like Christ, and that guides your work, I would think.
Yeah, and listen to what people are saying about the way you come off with them. You're going to have to listen to that and hear that and say, okay, I got to do some work here. That's usually one of the problems, is the person would rather blame the other person.
So you explained the therapy a little bit. Is there a specific type, a name that we should look for that's effective?
Yes. Someone who's a licensed mental health provider will be very familiar with something called dialectical behavior therapy. That's DBT. So dialectical behavior therapy. And the focus on that therapy is all the things we've been talking about. It helps you be more mindful of your thoughts, your emotions, and behaviors. So they'll teach you how to do Christian mindfulness, how to sit and pause and meditate from a Christian point of view, not from some Eastern Buddhist thing, but from a Christian point of view. You have to ask for that. In the therapy, you have to say, I want to do mindful meditation from a Christian point of view. It has a whole component of self-regulation of your emotion. It helps you tolerate distress, and it helps you be more interpersonally effective in your relationship. So if you work on this, you work with a therapist, you work with small groups, and this type of therapy is very effective, and it was actually developed for this. There's another one called schema-focused therapy, and the work there is looking at your thoughts that prompt all these negative emotions and behaviors. And many experts believe that weekly therapy involving education about the disorder, family support, social and emotional skills training can treat most people with borderline personality disorder.
You know, I often try and reduce things to their simplest point so I can understand them. You've heard me say many times, everything boils down to trust. Trust in God, trust in each other, trust in friends. It seems to me people with this disorder who worry about being abandoned have trouble trusting.
Yeah, it's such an important point because when you work with a counselor or a therapist, you have to trust. And it's also similar in moving forward in your relationship with God. You have to develop a relationship with God and trust Him to be good and working on your behalf. So ask around your community, or if your church can give you a referral for a Christian counselor or therapist. Take your time finding the right person. But remember, only God is perfect, and everyone else in your life will disappoint you at some time.
No kidding. Well, you know what? This has been a difficult program to talk about and think about, but here's the great news. There's hope, and your life can get better.
Exactly. And not only is there hope because of the treatment, but also because God is for you, not against you. He has good things for you, and He doesn't want you derailed. So ask for His help as you move forward. Ask for those of you who are living with someone who has borderline personality. Ask around, get some help, educate your family. Use what you've learned today to try to calm things down and be an advocate for the person to get the help. Most people get therapy to relearn how to engage better with people. Emphasize to your friend or loved one that there are good treatments out there to help them be more effective in their relationships because they want that at the heart of everything. And then they can live the life they were created to live.
And they need to know you love them and you're not going to abandon them.
Right. So getting the help is going to make all the difference. Well, that's all the time we have today. Many thanks to my co-host Norm Mintel, who makes this show a conversation, and our technical producer Wanjing Pu, and our editor Katie Sims Wilson. From all of us here at Faith Radio, hey, we'll talk to you again next weekend. In the meantime, remember, we're doing life together, and it's better when you don't have to do it alone.
Doing life together.
Hey, thanks for listening to this conversation from the Dr. Linda Mintel Show. These conversations are available because of your support. Become a supporter now at myfaithradio.com. Please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes, and share it with friends so we can live life to the fullest, walk confidently, and find healing and hope.